my grandmother and the goat dip.
Oh my God.
Hmm?
What'd you do? My bachelor when we went to okay.
My grandmother and the goat dip. Every morning about the crack of dawn, you could find my grandmother in her front yard with her larkspurs, her verbenias, her touch-me-nots, you name it, she had her flowers. And they reached from the front fence to the edge of the porch, except there was a trail where you go around the house. Then my grandmother would come up the steps to her front porch and sit on her rocking chair. With her bare feet, she would take her feet and dust them real well, toes and all, to get the sand off and put it in one pile to the side of her chair. Then my grandmother would grab her snuff box and she would take the front lid and fill it with snuff and open her lip and fill her lip with the snuff. And then my grandmother would start skeeting and skeeting and skeeting, getting all that snuff out of her mouth, but not putting any drop on her porch. Then my grandmother would pick up her favorite wish book. That would be the Sears catalog, where she wished and wished. But most mornings, she would have her Bible commentary and her Bible concordance and her adult Sunday school teacher's manual, because she taught Sunday school to the adults on Sunday morning. But before my grandmother did all of this, she would go to her east end side of her porch, where her water shelf was. And there was her wooden slab and water bucket with a gourd dipper in it. And beside that water bucket was the wash basin where you washed your hands, and a soap dish, which was usually a saucer from the kitchen. Beside it was another pail for carrying water, and on a nail on a post was her towel. Many times it was nothing but a white pillow slip that she had placed there for people to dry their hands with. Then my grandmother would take that empty pail and she would head to the front end of her fence where her well was. And she would sail that well bucket deep down to the very bottom where the gurgling veins were, gurgling up with the water, the ice cold water. And she would fill that water pail, fill it full, that well water pail. She'd fill it full and then she would roll it back up on her pulley. When she got it up, then she would pour it in her other pail and head back to her front porch where her water shelf was. And she would pour that water into her bottom-up, wooden slatted, barrel-shaped water bucket where her gourd dipper was. She would take that gourd dipper, brimming full of that ice-cold water that she got from that well, and she would drink, and she would drink, and she would drink, and she would say, so good, so good. And she would drink, and she would drink, and she would drink, and she would say, so good, so good. And we children would just look And our grandmother, we just knew she was just drinking the bestest tasting water in the whole wide world from that bottom up, wooden slatted, barrel shaped water bucket with that gourd dipper. And oh my, how we just wished and wished and wished we could drink out of that gourd dipper, that delicious tasting water out of that gourd dipper from that bottom up, wooden slatted, barrel shaped water. And then one day, my grandmother decided she would let us drink from her gourd dipper. And we dipped that gourd dipper up, brimming full of water, and we drank, and we drank, and we drank, and we said, so good, so good. And we take that dipper, and we drink, and we drink, and we drink, and we say, so good, so good. And we just couldn't wait until we would run home to our mother down the road and tell her about us drinking the bestest tasting water in the whole wide world. From that bottom up, wooden slatted, barrel shaped water bucket with my grandmother's delicious gourd. We knew that had to be the bestest tasting water in the whole wide world. But you know how teachers are. And you know, our mother was a teacher in that community. She told us in no uncertain terms that we were never, never, never to drink or eat behind anyone. And you know, she told our grandmother. And you know, our grandmother enforced that rule. And that truly ended us drinking some of the bestest tasting water in the whole wide world from that bottom up, wooden slatted, barrel shaped water bucket. Now, I can tell you how my grandmother got that wooden slatted, barrel shaped, bottom up water bucket. She would send my daddy off to the commissary in Sykes, a little town about 10 miles away, and he would buy her this wooden slatted, barrel shaped, bottom up water bucket. Then she would take that water bucket down to my great grandmother's spring, down the hill that was about 4 feet or more deep. She would sink that water bucket, that bottom up, wooden slatted, barrel shaped water bucket. She would sink it real deep down in that well, that spring well, and let it just sit there and sit there. See, that spring had those gurgling of veins that were putting that water in the spring, and she would let it just sit there and sit there until she knew it was about right. Then she would go back with her sheet or a big white towel, and she would lift that water bucket up, and she would dry off the sides real well, and she would look. And if there were no water drops of any kind coming out of that bottom of wooden sled, barrel shaped water, if there was no water coming out of it, then she knew that that water bucket was ready to use for her water bucket. Then she would take it and set it back on the front porch on the east end where her water shelf was. Now, and her gourd dipper would be in it. But let me tell you how she made the gourd dipper. Well, my grandmother planted the gourds on the side of her fence. You know what gourds are. They are a type of squash. So she planted them in the ground on the side of her fence on that far eastern end where her water shelf was. And she knew when that gourd dipper started growing, when those gourds started growing, she knew just the right spot that gourd dipper would come right for her. So when that bloom came and then it fell off, she took a string of twine and made a ball around it, bigger than a cup. And then she took two ends of it and trailed it until it was long enough for her handle. When the gourd handle got long enough for her handle, then she tied it off and took that gourd. With that gourd, she got a knife and cut a big hole in the top like you have on a cup. She took all the membranes out of it. You know, all the seeds and the things that you have like in an orange. She took all that out. Then she set it on the eastern side of her porch where the morning sun could hit it, because she didn't want the midday sun or the evening sun because it would crack. She wanted it to dry in an easy way. And when it would dry and it would harden, it wouldn't break. When it was real hard, she would take it and she would season it with vinegar and vinegar water, taking all the bitter taste away. Then her gourd dipper was ready for her to drink out of. She would take that gourd dipper back and put it in her wooden sled, barrel-shaped water bucket, and that's how she prepared her gourd dipper and her wooden sled, barrel-shaped water bucket for drinking. And that is the story of my grandmother and her gourd dipper.